I want to tell you about the day I understood with perfect clarity that I had been a guest in my own life. It started with a text message I wasn't meant to see, and it ended with a signature on a document that changed everything. But before we get into it, tell me in the comments, where are you watching or listening from today? I read every single one. It was a Saturday morning in late May, the kind of morning the Okanagan does better than anywhere else in the country. The air still cool, the lake just visible through the kitchen window, catching the early light. I was ironing my good shirt, the gray one my daughter-in-law had given me 2 Christmases ago when she was still pretending to like me. She said it made me look younger. I believed her because I wanted to. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me later when I thought back on it. They were perfectly steady. Because the shirt was for my son's convocation. He had finished his master's degree in civil engineering at UBC Okanagan 7 years after I paid for his undergraduate at Dalhousie, 4 years in Halifax, where I flew out twice a year because that's what you do. You show up, you don't send a card. You show up. I heard her voice from the back bedroom. My daughter-in-law speaking low and quick, the way she did when she didn't want the sound to carry through the walls of the house. My house. The one I'd been paying the property tax on since 1997. I turned off the tap in the kitchen sink, and the pipes clicked and went still. I caught the last piece of it. He can just sit with the department guests. Patrick will be in the family row with me and Owen. He's the one who was actually there for him. A pause. I'll handle it. I stood at the sink with my hands wet and looked out at the lake. The light on the water didn't change. It just kept doing what light does, indifferent and clean. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the one with the faded rooster print my wife had bought at a farmer's market in Penticton before she passed. I hung it back on the handle of the oven. I walked into the living room and sat down in the armchair. My daughter-in-law came out of the bedroom 2 minutes later, phone tucked behind her back like she was 16. She smiled at me, wide and practiced. "Ready soon?" she asked. I nodded. I said nothing about what I'd heard. I wanted to see how far she'd carry it. Let me go back. My son was born in 1989, the year I finished paying off my apprenticeship debt and got my journeyman's ticket as an electrician. His mother and I had been married 6 years by then. We were young and broke in the way that doesn't feel dangerous when you love the person across the breakfast table. We had a small house on Sutherland Avenue in Kalanoe, 2 bedrooms, a carport, a backyard with a crabapple tree that produced more than we ever knew what to do with. His mother made jam every August. We still have jars of it in the pantry. She died of ovarian cancer in 2011. My son was 22. He had just started his 2nd year at Dow. I flew out to Halifax the week after the funeral and sat with him in his apartment, and we ate delivery pizza and watched hockey and didn't say much because there wasn't much to say that would help. I paid his rent that year without asking him about it. Just transferred it every first of the month. That's not what fathers do to score points. That's just what fathers do. He met his wife in Vancouver in 2016 at a work event. She was smart and confident and spoke quickly about things she cared about. I liked her at first. She had an energy that was easy to be around. Her parents lived in North Vancouver. Her father, Patrick, was a retired school principal. Her mother taught piano. They were good people, I think, just people who had a different idea of what family looked like, and in that idea, I was useful but peripheral. Patrick was around more. That was the honest truth. Vancouver to Kelowna is a 3-hour drive. Halifax to Kelowna was a different thing entirely. When my son and his wife moved back to the Okanagan after the wedding, Patrick started showing up on weekends, helping with the deck renovation, watching the game. He was easy with her, easy with my son, easy in a way that filled rooms without effort. I noticed it. I didn't say anything. But I was the one who had transferred $12,000 into my son's account when his truck needed a new transmission and the wedding was 3 months away and he didn't want to ask. I was the one who had co-signed the mortgage on the house on Lakeshore Road, the one they lived in, the one with the view. My son's credit was still being rebuilt after a bad year in 2018, a contract that fell through in 2 months of almost nothing coming in. I didn't broadcast that. I just signed where they told me to sign. I was the one who had paid for the CIBC financial advisor who sat with them in 2020 and helped them set up their RRSPs properly. I paid that out of pocket because the advisor charged a flat fee for new clients. I didn't mention it afterward. That's not what you do. You just do it, and you let them build. Patrick came to the convocation too. Of course he did. I expected that. What I did not expect was what came next. The drive from the house to campus was quiet. My daughter-in-law sat in the passenger seat of my Silverado and looked at her phone the whole way up Gordon Drive. My son had gone ahead with a few of his friends from the program. We parked behind the Arts Building and walked to the gymnasium where the ceremony was being held. It was warm for May, the mountains still white at the top, the air carrying that clean Okanagan smell of pine and dust. Inside, the seats were filling fast. Families pressed into rows, paper programs being used as fans. I found my son's name in the program. Owen Frederick Callister. My name is Callister. Has been since I was born in Saskatoon in 1962. That name is on the co-signed mortgage. That name is on the co-sign of the original lease they had before the house. That name is on the truck my son drove for 3 years before he could buy his own. My daughter-in-law led me to a row near the front left. Good seats, close to the aisle where the graduates would walk. Then she stopped, checked her phone, and said, "Oh, actually, could you move back a few rows? I promised Patrick and my mother those seats. They're coming from North Van, and they won't know where to sit." She said it the way you ask someone to pass the salt. No hesitation, no apology in her eyes, just that practiced, reasonable smile. "Sure," I said. I moved back 4 rows and sat near the center aisle. I set my jacket on the seat beside me. I watched the row I'd just left. It stayed empty for nearly 15 minutes. Then Patrick walked in with his wife, confident and unhurried, and they settled into the front seats like they'd reserved them. My daughter-in-law leaned over and touched Patrick's arm. He laughed at something. They looked like the kind of people who had always expected front row seats. When my son's name was called, he walked across the stage in his blue hood and his black gown, and he looked like every year of work that had gone into him. I stood. I clapped. 4 rows back. Patrick stood too. He had one of those small cameras, the kind with a real lens. He took 6 photos in a row. I saw the flash from where I was sitting. After the ceremony, I made my way through the crowd. My son was near the exit doors with his cohort, all of them still in their gowns, laughing and taking pictures. I went to him. He hugged me and said, "Thanks for coming, Dad." And he meant it. I could tell he meant it. But then my daughter-in-law materialized beside him and started steering him toward Patrick, who had his camera out again, and my son looked back at me once over his shoulder with a look I couldn't quite read, and then he was gone into that other group. Patrick shook my hand when we eventually ended up near each other. Firm, easy, the handshake of a man who never felt out of place anywhere. "Big day," he said. "You must be proud." I said I was. I said it because it was true, and also because there was nothing else to say that wouldn't have taken too long to explain. I drove home alone. My daughter-in-law texted me somewhere around the Gaston Avenue intersection. The text said they were all going to Waterfront Wines for dinner. "Family dinner," she wrote. "Just us and Owen and my parents. You can join us after if you want, but it might run late and we know you have the drive back." I sat in the driveway of my own house for a long time after that. Not their house, mine. The one I had not put their names on, the way my father had told me long ago in a kitchen in Saskatoon that you never put names on what you built until you were sure. You just don't. Not because you don't love. Because love and ownership are different documents. Just us. And her parents. I was not included in that sentence. I went inside. The house was quiet. The light off the lake coming through the front window was doing that thing it does in late May, going gold and long, stretching across the hardwood. I sat in the kitchen, not at the head of the table, in the chair by the window, the one that catches that last light. I put my phone face up and then face down, and then I just left it. I didn't throw anything. I didn't call anyone. I sat there and let the feeling settle into something heavier than anger, something that didn't make noise, something that knew what it was. I didn't sleep much that night. By 6 the next morning, I was at the kitchen table with coffee. By 7, I had made 2 decisions. By 8, I had started on the first one. I called the cosigner release line at RBC. This is not a fast process. They told me that. But I told them I wanted to begin it. My son had 4 years of employment history now, a professional designation, and a salary that could carry the mortgage on its own. The bank would need to review his application as a sole borrower. I asked them to start the process and to contact him directly. The woman on the phone asked if everything was all right. Fine, I said. Just the right time to do it properly. Then I called my accountant in Kelowna, a man I'd been working with for over 20 years. I told him I wanted to review my estate documents. He asked when I could come in. I said Monday. He said Monday worked. I looked at the garage. There was a 40-year-old canoe in there, a chestnut prospector I had restored myself over 3 winters in the late 90s, maple ribs, canvas hull, the whole thing. I had been meaning to leave it to my son in the will. I thought about that for a while, then I put the thought away. Not gone, just not decided. My son called me that afternoon. His voice was different from his wife's, more careful. He said, "I heard you called the bank." I said I did. He said, "Dad, you didn't have to do that." And I said, "You have a good job now and a good salary, and a co-signed mortgage is a liability I'm carrying that doesn't reflect the situation anymore." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is this about yesterday?" I asked him what he thought happened yesterday. He was quiet again. I heard him breathing. Then he said, "She didn't mean it the way it looked." I said, "What way did it look?" He didn't answer that. "She asked you to move to the back," I said. "She told your department guests I would be sitting there. She arranged the front row for her parents without asking me, and then she sent me a text calling a dinner. At Waterfront Wines, a family dinner, and her parents were family, and I was an optional add-on with a long drive home." He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "I didn't know she sent that text." I believed him. I think I still believe him. "That doesn't fix it," I said, "and I think you know that." He said he was sorry. He said it like he meant it. But sorry, said into a phone to your father, is not the same as saying nothing at the time when it would have mattered. My accountant went through everything on Monday. The estate plan, the beneficiary designations on the RRSPs, the insurance policy I'd kept current since 1994. We sat at his table in the office on Spall Road with the file open between us, and I went through it line by line. Some things I changed, some things I left. He didn't ask me to explain the changes. That's why I've kept him for 20 years. He just adjusts the documents and lets the man sitting across from him have his reasons. I drove back along the lake road after. The water was high that week, snowmelt still coming down from the mountains. The birch trees on the east slope were still that pale gold green they get in spring, before summer deepens them. It was a Tuesday. Nobody else on the road. I drove with the windows down and let the cold air come in and didn't think about anything in particular for about 15 minutes, which was the longest I'd managed in a week. My daughter-in-law called on a Thursday. I let it ring. She called again. I let that ring too. On the third call, I answered. Her voice came through organized and certain, the way it always did when she'd prepared what she wanted to say. She said she felt things had become strained and she wanted to clear the air. I said I was listening. She said she hadn't meant anything by the seating. She said she promised her parents those seats weeks ago and it was just logistics. She said she was sorry if I felt excluded. If you felt. 2 words with a trap door in them. I said, you told your department guests that I would sit in the back. Not that there was a seating arrangement. You told them where I'd be. That's different from logistics. She was quiet. Then she said, Owen has always struggled with boundaries between our family and his father, and we're working on that as a couple. I said, I see. She said, we'd love to have you up for dinner next weekend. I said I'd think about it. I hadn't finished the canoe restoration yet. I'd been doing small repairs on it over the winter, replacing 2 cedar ribs that had cracked along the grain. I spent a lot of evenings in the garage that spring, sanding, fitting. The work was slow and required your full attention, and that was exactly the point. My son drove up on a Saturday in early June, alone. He came into the garage and found me bent over the hull with a strip of fiberglass cloth and a brush. He stood in the doorway for a while. Then he came in and sat on the workbench and watched. I should have said something at the convocation, he said. I kept working. I let that sit there for a moment. You should have, I said. He said, she didn't tell me she'd moved you. I only found out after, when one of my professors mentioned having a good conversation with a man in the back rows who said he was my dad. I thought he made a mistake. I set the brush down. The professor talked to you, I said. He nodded. He said the man seemed proud. Said he talked about the engineering internship I did out in Fort McMurray and how hard I'd worked. I had talked to the professor. A woman about my age, geology background, sharp and warm. We'd had a 20-minute conversation about the project my son had done on culvert failure analysis in northern watersheds. I had read his thesis. All of it. I had read it at the kitchen table with my reading glasses and a cup of coffee, and I had not understood all of it. But I had read every word because that's what you do. You read the whole thing. Did you know she moved you, my son asked, or did you figure it out at the ceremony? I heard her on the phone that morning, I said. The day of. He put his head in his hands. I didn't fix that moment for him. I let him feel the weight of it, because that weight was real, and it belonged to the situation, not to me. You can't carry other people's reckonings forever. We didn't talk about his wife much after that. We talked about the canoe. I told him I was thinking of taking it up to Shuswap in July. He said he'd always wanted to do that stretch near Chase. I said I'd think about it. The cosigner release came through in August. The bank sent me confirmation and copied my son on the letter. His name, alone on the mortgage, as it should be when a man is 63 years old and retired and his son is 34 and working and capable. I filed the letter in the same drawer where I keep the original deed to my house. Not because I needed the reminder, because documents tell the truth when people don't. I drove to Shuswap by myself in mid-July. Put the canoe in at Scotch Creek and paddled north past the bay where the osprey nests, where the water goes shallow and green over the sand. I camped 2 nights on the north shore. The first night was cold. The second night the sky was clear from horizon to horizon, the Milky Way straight overhead, no sound but the water and the trees moving. I thought about my wife, about the rooster dish towel and the crabapple jam and the way she used to sit at the kitchen table with her coffee mug held in both hands even in summer, just holding the warmth of it. I thought about the fact that she would have known what to say to me after the convocation. She always knew. She would have said something precise and quiet that named the thing exactly and then moved past it. She had that gift. I thought about my son. I thought about the moment he stood in the garage doorway and came inside and sat on the workbench. I thought about the text he sent me the following week. Just one line, I'm going to be better about this. I wrote back, I know you will be. I meant it. I still do. What I learned at 63, sitting in a canoe in the Shuswap River watching a great blue heron lift off from a rock and carry itself north without effort or explanation, is this. You do not have to announce yourself to people who have already decided where you belong. You do not have to argue about which row you're worth, the work you do, the years you show up, the money transferred quietly on the first of the month, the thesis read cover to cover. These things are not invisible. They are in the foundation. They are in the walls. They are in the signature that held the roof over all of it. Some people will see that, and some people will not. That is not your problem to solve. Your problem is only this. When the moment comes, and it will come, do you know what you're worth? Not what someone told you you were worth. Not what someone told you you were worth. What you actually know. Down at the level of the workbench and the canoe and the dish towel with the rooster on it. I think I know. Most days now I think I do. My son came up to Kelowna in September with a bottle of Okanagan Crush wine, and we sat on the back deck until the light went off the lake, and he told me things about his marriage that were honest and hard and that I will keep to myself, because some things a man tells his father are not stories. They're just true. I poured the wine. I didn't interrupt. I let him talk until he was done. Then I said, "You'll figure it out." And I meant that too. If you've ever paid the mortgage while someone else took the seat at the table, if you've ever been moved to a different row in your own family and said nothing because you were trying to keep the peace, I hope this finds you. The peace isn't worth what you paid for it, and the people who benefit most from your silence are never the ones who will thank you for it. You don't have to make it loud. You don't have to burn anything down. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pick up the phone, call the bank, and start the paperwork. That's enough. That's more than enough. Thank you for listening today. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Take care of yourselves. There's a moment I keep coming back to, not the ceremony itself, not the text message from my daughter-in-law, not even the drive home alone with the Okanagan light going gold through the windshield. It's the morning after, 6 in the morning, coffee going, the lake still flat and dark outside the kitchen window, and me sitting in the chair by that window thinking, how long have I been arranging myself around other people's comfort? That question has a long answer, 20-odd years of it. The mortgage co-signed quietly, the tuition transferred on the first of every month, the thesis read cover to cover with reading glasses and a cup of cooling coffee. I did those things because they were right to do and because I loved my son. That part I don't regret. The part I regret is that I let the doing of it become something I did in silence, as though the value of it depended on me never naming it. What I've come to understand sitting with all of this is that when you consistently act with integrity and ask nothing in return, it doesn't make you invisible. It makes you taken for granted. Those are not the same thing, but they feel identical from the inside. And that's the confusion that costs you years. My son is a good man. I know that. He stood in the garage doorway and came inside and sat on the workbench and told me the truth about what he hadn't done, which is its own kind of courage. He had the good sense to recognize what happened, even if he recognized it too late. That recognition matters. It doesn't erase the row he let his wife move me to, but it matters. It means something was working in him, some part that knew the difference between right and convenient, and eventually chose right. His wife made her calculation early. She decided I was useful background. She was not entirely wrong because I had been. But what she miscalculated was the moment when a man who has been quietly holding things up decides, just as quietly, to set them down. There's no drama in that moment, no announcement, just a phone call to the bank, and an appointment with the accountant and a long drive home with the windows down. That's what people don't understand about dignity. It doesn't require an audience. It doesn't require you to make anyone feel the weight of what they've done. It only requires you to know what you're worth and to stop arranging yourself smaller than that. I think about Owen paddling the Shuswap with me someday. I think it'll happen. Not because everything has been forgiven and resolved, but because he's working on it. And because I raised a man who, when he finally looks clearly at a hard thing, doesn't look away. That took something from him. It took honesty and a willingness to sit in a garage with his father and tell the truth without being asked to. That's not nothing. That took character. What the canoe taught me, what the Shuswap taught me, what 63 years in this country have taught me, is that the life you want doesn't come from holding up the roof of someone else's house. It comes from building something that belongs to you and keeping your name on it, not out of pride, out of clarity, out of the kind of self-knowledge that doesn't need to announce itself, just acts. The hands always find something new to hold. Mine found a paddle. Yours will find something too.